Pokemon, a topic that very little know more than me. Well, I say very little, a lot of people know more than me about Pokemon, but in my friend group, very little know more about it than me. So I figured, why not talk about a video? That's all. One of our favorite members of my dog Skelly, Lily Orchard, made a Pokemon video. Complete retrospective talking about the entire story, the gameplay, and sliding off the PokeTubers because they don't think better features good Pokemon. I'll get into that later. But yeah, that's it. Keep in mind there will be a lot of tangents as Lily does a lot of tangents, so I must argue what she's saying every single time she says something wrong. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into the video, guys. Hope you enjoy, because it's going to be a long one. I can already tell it's going to be very, very long. Now, before we actually get into the video, I thought I need to say I will be cutting out any unimportant bits that I don't disagree with and I don't agree with. But it's only like the major points of contention that I'll be arguing. Like, say, she says something bad about a story and or doesn't understand the entire premise of the story, then yeah, I'll talk about that. Or say she just gets something wrong about types or shit like that, I'll respond to that. But overall, it won't be a breakdown of the 6-hour-long video. That's just too long. If you like videos like this, please leave a like, comment, subscribe down below. You can go to my call to action now. And tell me if you agree with my takes, because I think for Pokemon I have some pretty interesting takes, especially when it comes to later gyms.
Pokemon is old. Really old. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly old it is. With the main series alone that spans 38 games in less than 30 years, it's unbelievably massive in scope. I mean, people say Kingdom Hearts has been going on a long time, but not counting remakes, that series only has 13 games, and when you really think about it, only 7 are required.
Wow, not even a minute in, and this always been so long, it's not even about Pokemon. Okay, now I'm gonna say a lot of Kingdom Hearts games aren't needed. Not 7, like you said. So there's, in my opinion, 8 Kingdom Hearts games that you need. That's the first one, coded or recoded, depending on which one you may play. The second one, 352 days over 2, 358 days over 2. Buffed by Sleep, Dream Drop Distance. There's another one. Kingdom Hearts 3, the awkward 0.2 story, and there's another one in there. I forget the last one. Anyway, it's interesting she said recoded or coded, whichever one you played. I don't care. Isn't needed because it is a direct sequel to the first game. You play the first game and the second game opens with you playing as Roxas. We're gonna ignore that for a moment. But at the end of Kingdom Hearts, you go to after you kill the boss, it shows a cutscene, and you go chasing after Pluto. Coded opens with you losing Pluto and walking towards Castle Oblivion. What's Castle Oblivion? Doesn't matter. This is a Kingdom Hearts video. Point is, in terms of story, that game literally explains what happens while Roxas is doing this thing in 358 days of the queue. And then we go to the Riku story in that. Riku's story is also important because if you play Kingdom Hearts 2 after playing Kingdom Hearts 1, you're confused as to how Riku's back because Riku is locked behind the door to darkness, or the Kingdom Hearts door, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. Point is, it's just wrong. This take about Kingdom Hearts is wrong. It sets the tone for the rest of this video when it comes to story conversation.
To hear some people talk, for instance, you would be forgiven for thinking that Generation 1 was this magical experience that changed people's lives, but in reality it was just the first open-world game on a handheld console. To hear people talk, you would think the Unova games had this deep, rich story that delved into complicated, mature topics, but in reality it's actually a story about the very weak premise of, well, I sure do love opinions.
Now, if you did the magical strat of spam the A button, sure, you could take out the story was, wow, opinions sure are great, but the actual story is the difference between truth and ideals. And you see it, especially in the ending with N. N's entire premise is ideals. N's entire thing is based on the idyllic future for Pokemon and humans if they could live as equals. And Alda is the representation of truth, where the truth is people in Pokemon are equals, but in a different way than like in once. And it shows because In doesn't understand how Alder can have a friend who died, his one of his previous ace, I believe. But say In's not in the right for doing what he's doing, he's trying to liberate our Pokemon. Like the premise of Black and White is really interesting, especially in a children's game if you think about it, because you're trying to explain to children the difference between like having an ideal and truth. I think more people need to understand that this is a game made for children, so they shouldn't be as critical with the story in the mid-gen games, because the premise of the story is there, the message of the story is there. It's just explained in the JRPG way the JRPG way of being overdrawn out, and especially in Pokemon, it's made for children, so it's really ham-fisted. And it's very shocking that you couldn't take out the actual like meaning of the story. It's really interesting that you missed out on that. Although I guess if you don't know that code, it's necessary to understand the full lore of Kingdom Hearts, at least the Sora storyline. Not talking about the full lore, because that's an entire beast on its own. Then I don't expect you to understand a children's game.
Place. Most arguments against Gen 1 cite the lack of tertiary features, the lack of a story, and the bugs. But personally, most of those are a positive, not a negative. It might not have a story, but having played the games that have one, honestly, I'm glad it doesn't.
Gen 1 Pokemon has the same story that all RPGs of the time have. You set out a quest to achieve a goal. In Pokemon, the goal is to beat the Elite Four and become the champion of your region, so in this case, Kanto. There's also side stories, like the Silph-Co plotline, or just the entire Rocket plotline. That's not called Silph-Co, it's just called the Rocket plotline. Or any of the other like things, like that games back then didn't tell stories through like dialogue. They told it through the context, like Lieutenant Surge. Let's look at him for example. In Pokemon, it's no secret there's wars. In the Lucario movie, you see a war between two different kingdoms fight, and you see Pokemon being used. But in Kanto, it's actually the first time we see a war being mentioned, because Lieutenant Surge is a veteran. We also see other things like the Marowak storyline or the Cubone storyline, like the story in Pokemon Gen 1. And if you're not stupid, you can see that. This isn't a criticism towards Lily or anybody else. It's just the story in every single Pokemon game. The difference is over the years, Pokemon has got more like open about the fact that it has a story, whereas the older games kind of hit it a little bit.
I'm glad there's still a Pokemon game out there, as flawed as it is, that just lets you go on your own adventure. It's something I feel Pokemon has gotten too far away from as the years go on.
Scarlet and Violet is the first truly open world Pokemon game, because in Gen 1, you were locked to regions by 8 gyms. That is not a thing in Scarlet and Violet. You can go wherever you want from the beginning. If you want to go to Cassiopeia Lake and die fighting the False Titan, you can. I mean, the False Dragon Titan, you can. But that's not really a positive for Scarlet and Violet. That's just me saying that Scarlet and Violet, as Pokemon games go on, we get closer and closer to being that open world experience. Sure, there's still story, but in the newer games, let's say Scarlet and Violet again, the most recent one, you get 3 storylines that all lead to one major, I can't think of what. They all convene in one like major ending point. Until the DLC came out, and then they increased the story, and I'm looking forward to 3 DLC, because when this is recorded, it's not out yet. Anyway, looking at everything we know about Pokemon, it is very likely that from this game forward, because the open world aspect of Pokemon is what's being, complimented, it's what's being praised, the fact that it's open world, the fact that you can do pretty much whatever you want from the get-go. I'm hoping that in future games, they keep with that premise, and they make it better by truly letting you do in whatever order you want. So let's say you want to go to Cassiopeia Lake in a Scarlet and Violet remake. Well, you see, Now you can fight the False Dragon Titan as it will be level 5, because your Pokemon's level 5, or level 9, whatever. And it's based around your Pokemon's level, not the enemy Pokemon's level. That'd be easy to program. The games do that already. Kingdom Hearts kind of does that. Anyway, point is, Pokemon back then was restricted because of 8 gyms and other moves like that. And Pokemon now is more open-worlded. Even Pokemon Let's Go, which is the Gen 1 remake for Switch. It's pretty open-worlded. After you get past Mount Moon, you can go do whatever you want in whatever order you want. So yeah, it just depends on how you play the game. That's all that matters now, is how you play the game. If you want to play it restricted, sure, but you don't have to. Hell, if I wanted to, I could blow up Scarlet and Violet, find a new save, grind up my Pokemon, and go fight the False Dragon Titan right now. I'm not gonna because I enjoy my time, but still.
Look, he comes out of my house, so I guess he was hiding in the closet. Are you my dad? He takes me to his lab where Sketchy's waiting for the both of us and lets me choose a Pokemon. I chose Bulbasaur, because it's correct.
Now, at the beginning of every gen from this point forward, I will be stating, I'll say when I'm going to say it. Around the time that Lily picks a starter, I will be stating the actual best pick for the generation. Now, for Gen 2, or for Gen 1, not Gen 2. In Gen 1, the best starter is Bulbasaur. Why is that? Well, here, let me explain. The only grass gym you encounter, the only gym that'd be weak to fire, Charmander, the one that Pokemon Company loves to redo stuff with, is like Gym 4, and then not again to the Ice Elite Four member, and even then, most of the Ice types in Gen 1 were also Water types, so it's neutral. It's not worth using him, and he'll just get one shot by most of them. Excluding like a lot of bullshit I don't feel like explaining right now. Squirtle. While not as bad as Charmander, there's only one gym in the early game, being Rock because Rock and Ground types are his like gimmick. Misty is neutral or resistant. I forgot which one it is off the top of my head. Then we go to Lieutenant Surge, a electric type gym, super effective against water, grass super effective, so on and so forth. You get the idea. The more gyms in the first half of the game are super effective against you than useful. Then Bulbasaur, good against ground types, good against water types, neutral to both, neutral to electric, strong against grass because of it having a poison type in it once it evolved. Someone like you get the idea. So Bulbasaur overall is the correct choice for this game. And that will be the last thing we talk about sliders until next gen. So hope you enjoyed that little tangent. I will explain why picking the next gen is actually the worst pick you can pick.
In the forest, I was looking intently for a Caterpie, for far longer than seemed usual, actually. I kept running into Weedle instead, so I looked it up, and it turned out that the encounter rate for some Pokemon is different based on the version, not just the exclusives. No, I don't care for that. Should've played yellow version, Lil. I did eventually find a Metapod, though. I really want a Butterfree because I have a bone to pick with literally every single Poketuber on the planet. See, because my generation is kinda dumb, there's this idea that because Butterfree doesn't get stab moves, that makes it useless, that it's an early game Pokemon and you should soon replace. I disagree with that attitude, and I think that attitude is why Whitney and Cynthia made you all into whimpering piles of mulch and made you think you need to trick out a Weavile to even stand a chance.
Now, I'm looking at a lot of articles. Now, here's a fun fact. In later gens, like say Gen 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I don't think Butterfree's very useful. Because it's a good starting Pokemon. But even in Gen 4, I'd argue that it's not useful. Or maybe Gen 3. When the abilities get added, is that Gen 2 or Gen 3? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, once abilities get added, its abilities weren't the most useful for what it's originally made for. I'll explain its abilities. Compound Eyes. Now, if you don't know what Compound Eyes is, which I assume most people watch my video, probably hasn't played Pokemon, or maybe you have, you just don't know abilities, or maybe you know abilities and you don't want to hear me explain this. Too bad. Compound Eyes increases the accuracy of your moves. So let's say you have a Fury Swipe. if you have compound eyes, then you're more likely to hit all 5 hits. That being said, I don't think Battlefield even has the ability to take advantage of that in its move pool. I'd have to look at its move pool. Let's check Gen 1 because it's one you're playing. It doesn't have ability, but let's just go ahead and check his move pool. Yeah, I don't think it has. It doesn't matter. Okay. So that's the first one, compound eyes. Okay, then there's tinted lenses. Now, what does tinted lenses do? Let's read it, because I don't even know. In battle, tinted lenses doubles the damage done by any moves that the Pokemon uses, which are not very effective. This effect is independent of whether the type effectiveness is 1 times or less. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, you see, I'll explain. It just makes, like, say you use a water type move on a fire type Pokemon, it makes it stronger. It's simple. But yeah, it doesn't, like, it's just not a good Pokemon for late game, especially with Pokemon like Tyranitar that starts the game with Sandstorm upon throwing it out, and buff, like, the Sandstorm damage is really important, like, competitively, which is what people talk about when they talk about this Pokemon's not good. It's competitive. You know, like Nuzlocke or challenge runs. Butterfree is good early game because it evolves to Butterfree and thus has the biggest stat total out of any Pokemon around that time at an evolution of like 18. That's when it's fully evolved. Versus your starter, which has to be level 32, 34 in Gen 1, I think. So yeah, it's just a good for early game because of the abilities it has and the moves it runs. That's not meaning it's a bad Pokemon. It's definitely what's Pokemon, and I'll probably mention them later. But ultimately, use whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's a children's game. It's not hard to beat, especially if you use like Butterfree sleep strats, because in Gen 1 sleep strats were pretty powerful, if I remember correctly. Again, it's been a while since I played Gen 1.
Kind of admire it. Brock even says at the start that his whole gimmick is defense, and unless you open with Squirtle, it's not going to be a straight one-shot. But there's something clever here. See, Brock's Onix uses Bide, a move that relies on taking damage, and it can very easily fuck you over if you feed it. A lot of people have pointed out that Bide is pretty useless because it gives the enemy an opening to set up status moves. But that's the beauty of it. That's what the game is trying to convince you to do. As early as the first gym, the game is teaching you that status moves are the way to go. And for a Pokemon that is as defensive as Onix and has as low attack as Onix, Bide is a really good move to have.
Now, for once, Lily's not wrong. Which is shocking, I know, for most of us. Okay, the breakdown she gave is, without Squirtle, you won't one-shot, what's his name? Fucking, Onix, that's the name. So Bide will probably kill you. However, she left out that Vine Whip of 35 power, with it being stab and super effective, as well as being a special attack, will probably kill Onix in 2 turns. So, yes and no. And even if it's not, you probably won't die to one Bide, because that's just 35 power. I believe Bulbasaur's defense is high enough that you won't lose. Let me double check. Generation 1. Yeah, Bulbasaur's defense is high enough that you won't be okay. But it's not much better. It's not really good. And especially with Bulbasaur being a special attacker, with 65 at the max you could have, 65 IVs the max you can have, that means that it is very likely that you will definitely 2-shot. So it is still beneficial to, like, use status effective moves, obviously. You use Growl on this, Growl's not going to do anything, Growl does not affect Bide. But yeah. I guess if you want to waste a ton, you can use Growl. I would have just used Leech Seed twice if you want to avoid that. Or Leech Seed and Poison Powder, both of which you should have at that level when you're fighting Brock. Anyway, yeah, it's a thing of play how you want. You can play around that. If you know how to play, you can play around it.
involved with, but the truth of the matter is that people my age have been complaining about these games being too hard for a long time. Like, it wasn't Gen Z that made Whitney and Cynthia into a meme, or complained about a non-issue like the HMs.
Now, earlier in this video, you said stuff about Pokemon, the first Pokemon game being open world, which I guess if you want to compare it to like before Gen 8 and 9, maybe even Gen 11, like 7, I'd agree with you. However, to say HMs are a non-issue when you want an open world Pokemon game is wrong. It's clearly wrong. Much like how I don't like Gen 7's way of handling it, all HMs do is limit your ability to move, thus removing the open world aspect. Now, that's good if you want to make a linear story like Pokemon was up until Paldea, and to a lesser extent Sword and Shield. But to say that Pokemon's open world, then say HMs are a non-issue when you want an open world Pokemon game, is just a lie. You are lying. Or you do not understand what open world means. Because open world means, from the get-go, like say Breath of the Wild, after the tutorial, from the get-go, you can go to whatever you want. You want to go to Goron Mountain and instantly fight that Divine Beast. You can. If you want to go to the Zora and fight the Zora's Divine Beast, you can. That's an open world. What Pokemon Gen 1 was a linear story with the idea of an open world, in my opinion. Which is kind of what it should be, because it's really showing of the mentality of the creators at that point. But hey, what do I know? What do I know? I'm just somebody with too many hours of Pokemon that's played Pokemon since they were a child, and understands these stories to a higher degree than you at least.
I honestly think one of the reasons characters like Charon and Bianca are so popular isn't because they have compelling character arcs, but because they kiss the player's feet. And I think it's largely people my age who like that about them. They often say they don't, but I think that's just social desirability bias. Every gamer has a praise kink, no matter how hard they try to convince you otherwise.
Okay, this is just wrong, because you are older than me, you are 30. People your generation hated Gen 5 because it was a soft reboot. They hated Charon and Bianca. People my generation and my friend's generation, people 25 and lower, love Gen 5. Like, you open this entire video saying the major points of debate are the generation divide Pokemon. So Gen 1, Gen 2 are the same generation. Gen 3, Gen 4, basically the same generation. Gen 5, Gen 6, basically the same. You get what I'm going at, right? These generational splits that you see mold how Pokemon is seen. And Gen 5 was the first major time we see that. We've seen it again recently, and I'll talk about that whenever we get to that. But it's very, very apparent that from the perspective of somebody who's played Pokemon like you are saying you have, you should understand the controversy of Gen 5, every single generation. It's not the it's completely based on generational changes. That's it. Well, most of the time. Sometimes there's the issues that I'll get into when we get to Gen 7, because I hate Gen 7. So I'm glad that's the first part of that video, but yeah.
People complained about Rock Tunnel because you needed to use Flash or wander around blindly, and we'll get into HMs in a little bit because I actually like them.
You can't say you want an open world Pokemon game then say you like HMs. The whole reason for HMs is that it's to stop you from exploring the rest of the world before you're at the correct level, or before you beat the correct gym. The entire point of an HM is to stop you from moving. That's why Cut stops you from doing the 4th gym. That's why Fly makes it easier to maneuver around. It's to stop you from being able to move fast. So you move at a pace that the game wants, instead of you being able to go wherever you want. Otherwise, you'll be able to go to the first gym the last gym and die. That's how it works. HM is there. HMs are there to slow you down. Just like how the Gen 6 and 7 way of doing it also is not good. There's no method except for Sword and Shield and Paldea, whatever you want to call it, that does open world Pokemon correct. And if you think otherwise, you are coping. You are showing your nostalgia bait, or whatever you're nostalgic about. And it shows in your opinions in Gen 1. Everything you say, you will later criticize. There's a story in this. You like the fact it's open world, but you also like HMs. You either show you're a hypocrite and criticize another games for having a story, when Gen 1 also had a story. It's just not as obvious as other games. Or 2, you are contradictory in your statements about Gen 1, where you say it's a good open world game, and then you say you like HMs, which the only reason for them was to stop you from moving too fast. You are not making sense, Lily. This entire video so far does not make sense.
Now this is the part where I'm supposed to talk about how powerful the psychic type is and how broken and overwhelming it is. Everyone talks about it and how obscenely powerful the psychic types are. Here's the thing though, that's only true in theory. Psychic's power comes from a large variety of stab moves and its two weaknesses either not being coded properly or possessing no moves of decent power. Sure. But one thing we're going to run into later is that the Pokemon community operates as if stab super effective moves are the only things that exist. You remember how I mentioned I had a bone to pick with Poketubers? Well, here it is. This is why Butterfree is often derided as a low tier Pokemon, because she doesn't learn stab moves. But the thing is, other strategies exist. Butterfree might not have stab moves, but she has an array of status moves. Sleep is godlike in this game, and she's one of the earliest sleepers. And you don't need stab to do some pretty meaty damage either way. Neutral attacks are still a thing. Status moves are still a thing. Alakazam might have high special, but his physical defense is in the toilet. And a decent physical move, even if it isn't super effective, is going to body the fucker. These Pokemon are overpowered if you're someone who thinks having no weaknesses means you can't be killed, but that's never been the case. We all beat Sabrina as kids after all, and chances are you beat the kid who had Mewtwo. In fact, despite how supposedly powerful psychic types are, Sabrina has never been memed on as heavily as Whitney or Cynthia have been in the past. And shit, Cynthia's Garchomp has a 4x weakness and is still considered brutally difficult even though she has a Pokemon with no weaknesses. The truth of the matter is that Alakazam just doesn't have the moves available to him to really take out his real weaknesses, physical attackers. To be as broken as people claim Alakazam is, he would need a much wider variety of moves, and he's just never really had that. But Gen 1 psychic types just weren't that broken to begin with. Just use Slash, like ever.
Now, you kind of blew over the speed stat that was there. 120, okay? That's pretty fast for Gen 1 Pokemon. There's not many Pokemon that exceed 120 speed at that level, I believe. There may be a couple, but from my memory, there's not a lot. And later, the best physical attackers like Gyarados and Pokemon like that were special attackers in Gen 1 because of the water attacks being special only. Flying was physical, but I don't think there's many good flying moves. Slash is good, but it requires too many hits. You said Sleep, which, yes, Sleep was Lux. Couldn't Sleep is always Lux. You don't have Compound Eye, so you still have a chance of missing that you won't have in later gens. Which is why I believe Butterfree is also considered a good early tier Pokemon because of Compound Eyes, but there's so many Pokemon that do it better. Like I explained earlier. And there's items that do Compound Eyes ability basically the same way, and you can just put on any Pokemon that has Hypnosis or Sleep Powder and do the same thing. But yeah, it's like your entire point here is use physical attack, yes, but except say a Pidgeotto, there's not many Pokemon you'd have at this point from memory that would 1 be a physical attacker and 2 hit hard enough to kill. And that's a problem, because once Alakazam starts going, let's say you don't kill with your first attack with Pidgeotto, okay? I don't think Pidgeotto's special defense is pretty high. I'm pretty sure it's pretty low, and you will lose pretty fast if you get fitted with an Alakazam Psychic. I'd have to do damage calcs, and I'm not damage calc mood, and I don't feel like going with it. But yeah, there's just so much you have to consider when going to this gym if you're playing this curve, like say in a Nuzlocke, or if you play a harder ROM hack of it. Like, sure, if you're playing the game how devs intend it, then it's not hard. But most Poketubers, when they talk about this shit, playing the harder ROM hacks, or challenging themselves by using like weak tail Pokemon or using Nuzlocke rules. And you're kind of shitting on them because they're not talking about like general play. They're talking about for Nuzlocks. In the Nuzlocke, Butterfree is a good early Pokemon, and Alakazam is a run ender due to the fact it hits like a truck. And while it's weak to physical, the best physical attackers aren't physical attackers in Gen 1. So yeah, there's a lot to consider when you talk about this shit, and you're not considering any of it. You're just shitting on people because they talk about Alakazam being a run ender. And we'll get to Whitney and Cynthia when we get to Whitney and Cynthia. There's a lot to cover, I know. This is gonna be like a 5-part video series, I can already tell.
Generation 1 is in this weird position with Gen 2 because they're both very freeform games. Starting from Gen 3, but really picking up speed in Gen 4, Pokemon became more linear, more JRPG.
Pokemon has always been JRPG. What you fail to realize is that JRPGs when Pokemon came out was slightly different than what they are now. JRPGs back then were Final Fantasy, which was also freeform and open, more so than Final Fantasy is in Final Fantasy VII, where it's more linear, like how newer Pokemon games are more linear. Like you fail to connect these two, that the genre of game evolved, so of course everything else is going to evolve with it. That's how it works, and it's not hard to understand if you understand how game mechanics and gameplay evolve over time, but you are too small-minded to understand that.
To me, the ideal Pokemon adventure is Ash's Adventure, where you're going on your own personal journey. Maybe you run into a new conflict at a given city, but at the end of the day, it's still your journey to make of it what you will, and that will continue to have value so long as Game Freak continues to try to make Pokemon into Final Fantasy.
So, you don't like Gen 1 then, because Gen 1 is not Ash's Adventure. Whenever they did do Ash's Adventure in Pokemon Yellow, guess what? It was still played with the HM cuts, or the HM blocks, which is not Ash's Adventure. Ash's Adventure is most like Gala or Paldea, whatever, because it's more open. You have a goal in mind. Sure, you have to fight the gyms in order. In Paldea, if you don't do it in the correct order, you'll just get fucked over. But it's still your adventure. You can do it however you want. Aside from Gala, because there's only gyms. But in Paldea, that's completely your adventure. You decide, do you want to help Penny? Do you want to help Cassiopeia? Do you want to help Arvin? Or do you want to go for the gym badges? You get to decide how it's played. And that is the closest to Ash's Adventure that any Pokemon game has got. Change my mind. Man, this is gonna be a long series. It's gonna be at least 10 videos, probably. Hopefully it's just 10. Each generation is gonna be cut up into its own video because I have to talk too long about it. If I get lucky and get 2 in one video, that'll be great. But right now, Gen 1 and Gen 2 are probably gonna be long. Gen 4 I know is gonna be long because I have a lot to break down in Gen 4. Gen 3 I know will probably also be long because I have a lot to break down. Gen 5, I don't know how long that's gonna be. I only got halfway through watching it my first time before I stopped. This series is gonna be a lot of long videos, and maybe I have to put it all together for you at the end. But right now, I do not have any plans of making a Mega Mix. They'll all be in the playlist so you can watch it back to back to back to back. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. If you like videos like this, I'll keep making them. I like making videos like this where I can sit here and just talk about something I'm passionate about. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.